stood at the foot of a great high mountain that I wanted so much to climb. And on top of this mountain was a beautiful fountain, and beside it the tree of life. I fell down on my knees at the foot of this mountain, cried out, Odin, what must I do? I want to climb up and see, want to learn from this tree that grows so clear in my view. From the top of this mountain, saying, child, these are my rules. Just start with Fehu and climb on upward between the etheric and rude. Climbing upwards, taking Odin's advice, and the higher I got, the harder I climbed. Climbing upwards, and the journey never ends, but through symbiosis I farm and live free, climbing higher each day by the alchemist way. So friend, if you're willing, climb this mountain with me. Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird. She warbles as she flies. She never hollers cuckoo till the 4th day, July. Gonna build me a log cabin on a mountain so high, so I can see Willie as he goes on by. I play cards in England, and I play cards in Spain. I'll bet you $10 I'll beat you this game. and my whip's in my hand. Step aside, little woman, my horses won't stand. Jack and Jack and I've known you from old. You robbed my poor pockets of my silver and my gold. Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird. She warbles as she flies. She'll cause you no trouble, and she'll tell you no lies.
Hail, and welcome to Odin's Alchemy. Last episode, we just had a talk with Owen Benjamin. Be sure to go see his documentary. The Bears showed up, as usual. Love the Bear community. You guys are the best. Fantastic being on the Bear app and seeing you guys with all the work that you put in and everything, and all the things that you do. It's wonderful. As far as upcoming, next we got George Weissman. If you've never heard of him, he works with a thing called Brown's gas, where you do electrolysis in water with salt, and this produces hydrogen, and then you use the hydrogen as an ignition for things to help with different things. Well, this Brown's gas, then he's taken it up to another level where it's plasma, moves it up to a plasma state, gets an extra hydrogen in there. He's doing everything from using that for your own personal health, breathing it in, taking the water that this is ran through and drinking it, using it to weld with. And the cosmology that Lucas and I are working on with the galvanic cell, hydrogen is a big part of that. So that's going to be real interesting to get all that worked out. And then after that, we got Mr. David Weiss. I haven't seen Dave in a while, so we'll sit down and chat with Dave. He's got a real neat new add-on to his app where you can find other friends in there. He just put that on his app, on the Beartaria Times app. They already had that on there, so it's real nice, these guys that are putting together these things that are connecting the community, because if we're going to start making it forward in the future with the way things are really looking, and it's pretty obvious for most people that we're going to have to start doing our own chain of supply, and that means starting to get to know the other people around you and know what they do and what they're capable of, and start filling your basic needs from a community, and then that even enriches that community and helps it grow, rather than help Walmart grow or whoever else you might be buying your products from. This honestly is just a real good opportunity for us to be forced almost into a position where we need to do this, and it's something that always should have been done, and that would have made it so these corporations never have had the power that they have. Part of the reason that they have the power that they have is because we gave it to them in letting them have our supply chain. If we still let our food, if we still grew our own food, raised basic animals, made it so that way the thing that we were dependent on is spices and things like that for flavor rather than need, then they wouldn't have this control that they have, and we wouldn't be in this predicament. So I applaud the guys that are helping do that, and both Dave and Owen have put that in their apps and made it so we can kind of start creating a counter community and a counter culture that can start working together in these times when we see the breakdown of the normal culture. Today, we're going to talk about the Lay of Harbard. So we're doing a little series where we're going through all the different heathen things, the different cosmology. We're getting ready to talk about Odin, and this one's kind of a strange place to start. It's not one of the ones that people typically tie in, but we'll discuss that after the fact. The Lay of Harbard, it comes from the Poetic Edda, or the Codex Regius. The Codex Regius is an Icelandic codex in which many Old Norse poems from the Poetic Edda are preserved, thought to have been written during the 1200s, and is made up of 45 vellum leaves. The original work contained a further 8 leaves, which are now missing. So this is the Poetic Edda. This particular copy is Hollander. When you read these in its original text, it's the Poetic Edda. So a lot of times those are hard to talk about, and we're trying to have a discussion. And unlike the first video, which we're going to go back and redo, there's another huge piece. I haven't said this on the video. I announced it on the social medias. We now have a producer, Jared, or G3RD3R on YouTube. If you want to go check out his work and support him, he's an amazing guy. He's going to be doing production on the show, and you're going to immediately notice that things are much better. So what we decided was I'm going to read the whole story, and then we're going to go through a nice copy, and then go through and at that point then discuss it. I'm not going to read it out of the actual Poetic Edda because, like I said, we're trying to have a discussion. But it's definitely something everybody should read and get familiar with. But again, whenever you're looking at poetic verse, things get a little bit tough. All right. The Lay of Harbard. A rank of mountains stood behind Thor. Some were like upturned ships, some like unfinished pyramids, and monstrous cones with their tops sawn off. And none of them were smiling. Thor strode west over the tundra, and the sun kept pace with him. Then late in the morning, he left the wilderness behind and hurried across scrub and undulating land. So he came to a swift, deep channel. The air was utterly still there. The sun placed a dazzling hand on the water, and the water seemed barely to move as it moved. On the far bank, a figure sprawled in the midday sun, and his flat-bottomed boat lounged beside him. "Hey," bawled Thor, and the water quivered. "You over there, are you a ferryman?" The figure stirred and sat up. He cupped his hands. "Who is that oaf yelling over the water?" "Ferry me across," called Thor. "I'll pay you from this pannier." Thor eased his thumbs under the shoulder straps. "It's packed with fine fare, and I've eaten as much as I already can. I've had a glut of herring and a pool of porridge before I set out." The ferryman slowly got to his feet and pulled his hat well down over his head. "You're pleased with yourself, aren't you? Ah, if only you knew what lies in store for you. When you near home, you'll hear nothing but moans. Your mother is dead." "My mother dead?" cried Thor. He screwed up his eyes. He screwed up his whole face. What grief could be greater? Having alarmed and upset the credulous Thor, the ferryman began to insult him. "Barefoot," he called scathingly. Beggar's clothes, not even breeches. I doubt if you even have a place that you can call your own. Bring over your boat, roared Thor. No need to be afraid. I'll guide you in. Anyhow, whose ferry is that? Now the ferryman took his time. He turned his back on Thor to taunt him and smiled grimly. Whose ferry is that? Repeated Thor. Hildal, thy slaughtering wolf, entrusts it to me. He's a wise man. He lives on Rathsea, the Isle of Council, and he has given me my orders. No pilferers, no horse thieves, only worthy men and well-known faces. So, said the ferryman, if you want to cross here, tell me your name. I'll tell you, shouted Thor. Though I stand alone, I am Odin's son. I am Mili's brother, Magni's father, strongest of the gods. You, ferryman, you are talking to Thor. The gods' words made waves on the sounds. They ran straight across the channel and broke at the ferryman's feet. And who are you? I'd like to know, shouted Thor. Tell me your name, ferryman. My name is Harbard. I seldom hide it. Why should you hide it? Or am I talking to an outlaw caught up in some feud? What if you are? Retorted the ferryman. Unless I'm fated, I can look after myself against the likes of you. Thor clenched his right fist, rubbed it against his beard, and stared at the cold water. You're not worth the trouble of wading across this channel and getting soaked up to the waist. But I'll repay you, you knock-kneed ferryman, when I get across this sound. Harbard put his hands on his hips. Here I stand, and here I'll wait. You've not met my equal since you fought Hrungnir. You want to talk about Hrungnir, do you? That lolloping giant? Do you know his head was made of stone? And yet I killed him? I laid him out lifeless? And you, Harbard, what were you doing meanwhile? I spent 5 winters with Fjalvar on the island of Elgron. There was plenty to do. There we fought. We sank our shafts into heroes and virgins. Thor rubbed his beard again. How did you win them, your women? They welcomed us with good grace. Yes, with high spirits. And they were well advised to do so, for they could no more have escaped us than make ropes of sand or dig the bottoms out of valleys. Harbard opened his eyes. I was the one they turned to first. I slept with 7 sisters, and each one gave me ecstasy. And you, Thor, what were you doing meanwhile? I killed the fierce giant Thiazi and hurled the eyes of Elvaldi's son into the scalding heaven. They bear witness to my feats. Everyone can see them. And you, Harbard, what were you doing meanwhile? I enticed night riders from their husbands. I wrought love crafts with those witches. And that giant Hellbard, he was not made of straw. He gave me a magic branch, and I whipped wits off with it. So, called Thor, that's how you repay a generous gift? The gray-bearded ferryman shrugged. The oat, he shouted across the shining water, grows strong on shavings from all sides. Each man for himself. And you, Thor, what were you doing meanwhile? I journeyed east to Jotunheim. I slaughtered slovenly giant women as they shambled over the fells. If they were still alive, there would be a terrible throng of giants and no men in Midgard. And you, Harbard, what were you doing meanwhile? I was the cause of war in Yelland, the land of slaughter. I set princes at each other's throats. I thwarted peace. Thor looked at the ferryman. He listened. His brow was creased in thought. After they've fallen in the fight, shouted Harbard, the nobly born journey to Odin. But Thor, he caters to the great gang of thralls. I see how even-handed you'd be in your gifts of men to the gods, retorted Thor. Not that you've any say in the matter. Your limbs are strong, but your heart is faint, jeered the ferryman. Such was your fear. You were glad enough once to crawl in the glove, and there you forgot your name. Thunderer? You were so scared of Thjallar might hear you that you didn't dare fart or sneeze. You womanish ferryman, I'd swipe you straight down to hell if I could reach over this sound. Why bother, said Harbard with a voice like oil. We have no quarrel. And you, Thor, what did you do next? Away in the east, I patrolled the bank of the Irving. Svarang's son tried their luck there. Thor suddenly stooped and in one movement picked up a block of stone and hurled it over the sound. It whirled as it flew. Harbard stepped hurriedly out of the way, and the boulder buried itself in the bank beside him. Like that, yelled Thor. They threw boulders. Much good it did them. They begged for a truce. And you, Harbard, what were you doing meanwhile? I was in the east, too, and came to a certain understanding. I turned the head of Linen White Maid, and we met in secret. I aroused that lady wearing gold ornaments, and then I enjoyed her. A woman well found, said Thor. I could have done with your help, called Harbard, to hold that white maid down. I wish I had been there with you, shouted Thor eagerly. I have been only too ready. And I'd have trusted you, said Harbard evenly, if you were not known for breaking promises. No, called Thor. That's not true. I'm no heel biter, like an old leather shoe in the spring. And you, Thor, what were you doing? I was on Halessi Island, the island of the sea god. I slew the brides of the berserks. They were depraved serpents. Thor, you brought shame on your head, said Harbard scathingly. You lady killer. They were more like wolves than women, protested Thor. They attacked my well-trimmed ship and threatened us with iron clubs. Thiafi ran in awe. And you, Harbard, what were you doing meanwhile? I was one of the hosts that came to Asgard's frontiers to raise our banners and redden our spears. Are you telling me that you meant to fight the gods? I'll give you a little finger ring, and then you won't fret, said the ferryman mockingly. It will be a peacemaker between us. Thor was enraged. He kicked at the bank, and a hailstorm of grit and pebbles rippled the silken water. He gripped Mjolnir in his huge fist. Where did you dredge up such filthy abuse? I've never heard as foul an insult. I learned it from men, old age, men who live in the hills of home. Thor shook his head in anger and envy. That's a fine name for barrows, hills of home. That's what I call them. And your sharp tongue will be the end of you if I choose to wade across this river, shouted Thor. You'll howl more loudly than a wolf if I hit you with this hammer. Harbard replied all the more swiftly. Your wife Sif, she's doing some entertaining. She has a lover. Keep your strength for him. That would be more to the point. You witless fool, roared Thor. Shut your mouth and keep your stabbing tongue inside you. You're a liar. The ferryman paused with his one eye peering into the shining water that stops for no man. No, he called. I'm telling the truth. Anyhow, how long you're taking to get home? You'd be well on your way by now if you'd crossed in this boat. You womanish ferryman, you've kept me waiting much too long. Thor paced up and down the bank of the Sound, now swinging round and changing directions, now glaring across the water like a caged animal. The ferryman watched him. I never thought a mere ferryman could detain Asa Thor. Thor's eyes were blazing, and he gave a great bellow of rage that rang round the sky. Here's some advice. Row your boat straight over. Keep your mouth shut and set down Magni's father on the far bank. Go away, retorted Harbard. I'm not rowing you across. Thor bent over the swift, cold water. He saw himself in it. He saw, too, how the ferryman had toyed with him and how for once his strength was of no use to him. He lifted his head and thrust out his red beard. If you won't ferry me over, he called, at least tell me the way round. Few words, but many miles, replied Harbard. Over stocks and over stone. Take the track on your left until you come to Midgard, and there you'll find your mother, Fjorgen. She'll show you the way to the trembling rainbow that brings men to Asgard. Can I get home today? Asked Thor. Walk fast, don't rest, and you might be back before sunrise. We've talked long enough, said Thor angrily. You do nothing but mock me. He turned and then looked back over his shoulder. If ever we meet, I'll pay you in full for refusing me this ride. Thor strode away, furious and scorned, and as he went, the jeering laugh of the ferryman followed him, and then Harbard's words, Get lost, let every evil being have you. The god quickened into the vast gray wasteland. There was a sandstorm in the wilderness. The wild unwound it, a long scarf leading into the lee of the Indigo Mountains. So, what this particular type of poem is called is a fleeting. And basically, a fleeting is a verse where insults are exchanged. At its most basic level, fleeting is an exchange of verse insults, with those insults normally designed to attach themselves to rumor and innuendo, thereby questioning the recipient's ability to function as a normative member of society. Essentially, that means such things such as parentage, sexual normativity, personal bravery, largesse, and other intangibles that would be called into question. Such accusations could be particularly damaging in medieval societies where proof to counter such slander was not easy to obtain. How does one prove instances of past bravery, or ability to perform sexually, or parentage? It was enough of a problem in that Iceland legislated against slanderous verse with punishment set 3 years of outlawry. So this poem is basically like a battle rap. It's shit talking. You need to take it as such when you're looking at it. So what we set up here is we've got Thor, the big, dense, strong god. He even says, though, I'm the strongest of the gods. You know, just this big mad beast of a man. And then what we have on the other side of this river, that this mad beast of a god needs to cross, is Odin in disguise as a ferryman. And what we see immediately when this starts going is that Odin just is immediately wanting to give Thor shit. If anybody's ever worked in a construction site, or, you know, we've all had friends that were kind of meatheads that weren't necessarily the quickest and smartest, a lot of times it's a lot of fun to fuck with them. And especially when it's a guy that is overwhelmingly strong, that nobody could possibly beat up. That's definitely the guy that, you know, your typical person that has the ability to is going to mess with a little bit and probably find that really wickedly humorous. You know, you see throughout this entire poem where Thor just over and over threatens, you know, I kick your ass, ferryman who's nobody. And Odin on the other side's like, oh, sure you could. Yeah, you bet. Yeah. Oh, you're over there. I'm over here. Big bad man. So he's just messing with him the entire time. Most your scholars don't live the heathen life in any way, obviously. So that gives them a different perception of that. They've never been on a construction site giving each other shit, doing the things that men do with each other. This is one of the poems that is used to slander, in my opinion, Odin, where they're taking all these things that he's saying as very literal, even though there's no other proof for most of it. They're taking these things as very literal and then applying that to him and saying he's this philanderer, he's this horrible person, when this is the sole area where they can get this from. Like, they've never had a shit talking contest with a friend. And if it's a friend who doesn't recognize you, can't tell who you are, oh, you're going to play all kinds of games. So you immediately know that there's just some goofiness going on. It's some shit talk. First thing he says is, your mother's dead. Now, Thor's mother is the earth. So that would be crazy. Now, what you see later on in the poem, he needs to go to Midgard, so he's apparently not on Midgard at this point in time. But Thor's mother is Midgard, so the entirety of Midgard would be gone. You immediately know that didn't happen. So obviously, he's not being completely honest about what he's saying on his side. He's just trying to get Thor's goat, and he's doing an excellent job of it. Odin claims that he's in the employ of another person, just basically giving out credentials for who he is as a ferryman. So that way he's doesn't have to give up his identity. Then the next verse, he asks Thor who Thor is. Thor says, I'm Odin's son. I am Mili's brother. There's not really much known about that god in any way, shape, or form. Just basically this. Magni's father, strongest of the gods. Again, with him being the big meathead, the big strong guy. Tell me your name, ferryman. My name is Harbard. I seldom hide it. Or why should you hide it? Am I talking to somebody, an outlaw in a feud? And then the ferryman says, what if you are? So again, right here, he's immediately hiding who he is. He's not in a feud as a ferryman. This is obviously an untruth. So, and while an untruth, well, I'm not saying, untruth like you're a bad man. He's obviously just messing around with Thor, saying things that aren't real, saying whatever he can to thoroughly get under his skin. And doing a good job of it, because Thor immediately clenches his fist, starts yelling around, I'll repay you, you knock-kneed ferryman. And Harbard says, here I stand, here I'll wait. You've not met my equal since you fought the giant Hrungnir. And this is one of the adventures that he knows Thor has went on. It's not that Odin is really giving out any information in and of himself. He's just giving out Thor's information, getting under his skin, because again, Thor's at a huge disadvantage. He doesn't even know who Odin is, or this character is, does not know that it's Odin. Now, so in this fleeting, as we were talking about in the reading of what that is, part of it is taking rumor and innuendo, things that are situations that have maybe been talked about, there's some rumors about, and adding those nasty little colorful twists to them and splaying them out in the worst possible light. So that way you can make the person that you're having this exchange with look as poorly as possible. But in this particular exchange, he knows all of Thor's background. And because Thor does not realize this is Odin, Thor, the only thing he has to go on is nothing that this gentleman says, the words that this gentleman feeds him. That's all he has to go on in the way he looks. So he goes, I spent 5 winters with Fjalvar on the island of Elgron. There was plenty to do. There we fought. We sank our shafts into heroes and virgins. So here he's just talking shit. I went around killing heroes, banging virgins. Thor rubbed his beard again. Thor is a big bad fighter. He's like, women and fighting, that sounds pretty good. He says, how did you win these women? And he says, they welcomed us with good grace and high spirits, and they were well advised to do so. They couldn't escape. I was the first one they turned to. I slept with 7 sisters, and each one gave me ecstasy. So, this is no different than any high school kid. Holy smoke. Every high school kid's got to do this kind of thing. And yeah, I slept with 7 sisters, and they were the best, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, especially given the things that he's just previously said to that, this is again more shit talk. And Thor, what were you doing? I killed the giant Thiazi and hurled the eyes of Valdi's son into the scalding heaven. They bear witness to my feats. Everyone can see them. So here again, Thor is throwing up the deeds that he is famous for in the stories, and Odin is just talking mad shit. I entice night riders front their husbands. You're stealing women from right in front of their husbands. I wrought lovecraft with those witches. And that giant Hellbard, he was not made of straw. He gave me a magic branch, and I whipped his wits off with him. Or his wits off of him. So basically, Odin saying that, this guy gave him a gift, and he just fucked him over. Didn't care. Again, he's just trying to display that he has low morals and trying to get under the skin of this guy who is the defender of the realm, the defender of the people and the weak. and trying to get under his skin. And with this, he's showing in every way that the way he's acted as Harbard, that this Harbard person is a very low character and morals and somebody that Thor would naturally hate. And on top of that, he's throwing digs at him the entire time. Thor says, "That's how you repay a generous gift?" And the ferryman shrugs. "The oak he shrouded grows strong on shavings from all sides, each man for himself." So what you're talking about is that every tree in any forest in anything, as the other trees die, they become the food for the trees around them. And, many people will end up using that in like hugel cultures, a huge method of gardening, where you'll take the trees and you'll use that in order to hold in water and mineralize. And you then use your biochar, which is just the activated carbon coming out of these things. So he's like, yeah, man, people eat off people, nature eats off nature. So again, just talking shit, acting very callous, like he has low morals. And now when you compare this to Thor was the god of farmers. This is a very honorable person. Most people equate the real high honor to Tyr, but Thor was a very honorable person and very just and right. Because that's the way your country and farm living, when you're living in a small town, small land living, you need life to be very just and right. And that's where you're typically, even when you look at, modern culture, the way it's even portrayed, that's a small town thing where urban or rural thing where people are more reliant on each other rather than on the system. So this is a god that is the protector of Midgard, the protector of the people. And here's this guy over here getting his gold, like, yeah, do some real immoral shit. I don't give a shit, man. Who cares? And so then Thor, what were you doing? I journeyed east to Jotunheim. I slaughtered giant women. If I hadn't, they'd have overrun Midgard. Again, Thor just telling his stories. What were you doing, Odin, or Harbard? I was the cause of war in Yalland, the land of slaughter. I set princes at each other's throats. I thwarted peace. Thor looked at the ferryman. He listened, his brow creased in thought. After they've fallen in the fight, says Harbard, the nobly born journey to Odin. But Thor, he caters to for a great gang of thralls. Which again brings us back to what we were just talking about. Now, when we look at things, Odin was typically, when you break things down into your levels of 3, Odin would have been your nobly born that would have followed him, people like that. The more well-to-do, the horsemen. Horses were a really big deal back in those days, so it would have been people buying that were riding horses, as opposed to where Thor would have been your farmers carrying hoes, axes. It would have been more people like that. So Odin, knowing who Thor is and who his people are, he then now is disparaging the followers of Thor and not just Thor, while still again giving nothing really away about himself. I see how even-handed you'd be in your gifts of men to the gods, retorted Thor, not that you've any say in the matter. So now Thor just basically, it's a pretty bad return, but he just basically says, man, if that's what you think of my people, that they're like thralls, they're horrible, I see what you think of. Because from Thor's opinion, obviously, even though he's not on the higher intelligence scale, which is also one of the things that we're looking at when we look at that system, he's a very loyal, very trustworthy, his people are the hardworking, the salt of the earth. Thor's the salt side. And he's like, and if that's what you think of my people, then obviously you're kind of a dirtbag. So I see how you'd be. And So then Harbard retorts, your limbs are strong, but your heart is faint. Such was your fear that you were once, that you forgot your name in the glove of Fjalar. So what we're talking about is just another one of Thor's stories. This one's where he's going to he's going to Jotunheim, and he finds a giant glove and ends up spending the night in it. Doesn't realize it's a glove when he spends it in the night in it. Wakes up and this giant that's just overwhelming even for Thor is there, and he tries his best to harm it and everything. Doesn't go well. It's a really embarrassing situation, which ends up turning out to be magical. But again, here's a realistic situation of Thor. He's, again, just taking advantage. I know you. I'm twisting it. This is the way this type of poetry is supposed to work. And this enrages Thor. You womanish ferryman, I'd sweat you straight down to hell if I could reach over this town. And Harbard, because nothing Thor has been able to say has gotten any bite toward him or meaning to him, he's able to sit there completely calm. Like, why bother? We don't have a quarrel, you and I. What did you do next? Away in the east, I patrolled the bank of Irving. So again, Thor's just bragging about his deeds. So really, when you look at this entirety of this poem, very interesting, because you see a lot of the stories of Thor mentioned, and then just a lot of nonsense coming out of Odin, which coincidentally started out with a bad "your mama" thing. Your mama's dead. Like so immediately shit talking about the mom. That's horrible. So he gets Thor all completely worked up here. And then after he's gotten him good and frothing, now he goes into, and here's another part where the scholarly types like your Jackson Crawford really get into and like to use this against Odin and make him appear into a real bad guy. Where Odin starts going on about this maiden in white and how he had sex with her, and if he could have used Thor's help to hold her down and take her, and Thor's like, yeah, I would have been there. And what we see here is Thor's already so out of his wits, so just gone. Every time Odin just kind of leads him into a little something and then just gives him the zinger. And so in no way does this, again, situation come off as anything real. Because then, Odin's like, well, yeah, I would have trusted you, except for you're an oath breaker. And now Thor's again just all messed up about this. And no, I'm not. I'm no old leather shoe in the spring. Something that's going to bite your heel. That's your heel biter. Your old reliable shoe that is now turning against you, and rather than making your walk easier, is making your walk much harder. So he's like, that's not me. He says, so then he goes on, and I was on this island, and I was slaying the brides of berserks. They were depraved serpents. So again, here he's going bragging. And then Odin immediately just turns that on him, and, oh, you're killing women? Hey, you tough man, you. And Thor comes in. So those weren't women. They were more like wolves. They attacked my well-trimmed, so fully stocked ship, threatened us with iron clubs. Thiafi, who's from another story, who basically is like the fastest of the human beings, ran away. Harbard, what were you doing? I was one of the hosts to Asgard's frontiers to raise our banners and redden our spears. And immediately Thor's like, you mean you're going to fight the gods of Asgard? And obviously this isn't going to happen. And so here's where Odin says, I'll give you a little finger ring. Usually that was more of an oath ring, maybe a finger ring, I guess, but an arm ring would have been more likely. then you won't fret. So what we're getting in that is Odin, because Harbard would be Thor's lord. So I'll give you a little oath ring. You can be my servant, and then you don't have to fret. We'll have peace. And so just being a complete dick. Thor gets enraged, kicks the bank, grips Mjolnir's in his fist. Where would you dredge up such filthy abuse? I've never heard such a foul insult. And then Odin says, I learned it from dead men, basically, the burrows of the hills of home. And Thor's like, that's a fine name for the burrows, the hills of home. And Odin says, that's what I call them. So now, again, somebody hanging out in cemeteries, somebody hanging out with dead people. Thor, who's on the more dense side of things, you're also going to have to think that when you look at these rural locations, that's where people were way more susceptible to old wives' tales, superstitions, things like that, where as opposed to the way the higher-minded people looked at the world. So when he's saying I hang out in cemeteries, now he's again kind of just sullying himself, and just making himself into kind of a despicable character. Not really necessarily despicable, but pretty much. So then Harbard goes on, why are you even arguing with me? Sif is doing some entertaining on her own, which this goes into the story where Loki starts going on and talking about that. And Thor, again, his wife's cheating. You witless fool, yelled Thor. Shut your mouth. Keep your stabbing tongue inside it. You're a liar. The ferryman paused with his one eye, peered into the shining water that stopped no man. No, he called, I'm telling the truth. Anyhow. So basically, I'm saying all these things that are just wrecking your world. But anyhow, I just, if you had been in the boat, you'd already be on your way. But hey, I'm not coming to get you. So again, now Thor finally gets it. Like, you're just a dickhead. Says, you womanish ferryman, you've kept me waiting much too long. Thor paced up and down the bank like a caged animal. And then the ferryman screams out, I never thought a mere ferryman, because at this point he still is just a ferryman, could detain Asa Thor, the mighty Thor that can defeat giants and move mountains. Thor's eyes blazing. He gives a great bellow. Tries threatening the guy one more time. Row your boat over here. Shut your mouth. And Harbard, go away. Not rowing for you, bro. And so that's when Thor bends over and looks at himself and realizes, you're not gonna do anything that can bully this ferryman into doing what you want done. There's nothing that you can do that's going to make that happen. And that realization's hitting in for him, which is a very odd and weird realization, because really one of the only other times up until this point that you see that is from the story where he hides in the glove, where he faces a giant that he thinks is overwhelming. He hits him in the forehead with his hammer, and the giant's like, acorns falling off some trees? Is there little flies flying around? What's going on? And he smokes him again, and basically the same answer. And Thor doesn't realize that this is magic, and he's really moving mountains and doing things like that with the strength that he's displaying. But up until that truth gets revealed to him, he gets to feel again this basic powerlessness, this thing that I'm the mighty Thor. And so this realization finally is sunk in on him, and all his rage, despite all his rage, he's still just a Thor on the bank, right? um, so he yells, can I at least get directions? And Harbard gives him directions, go over the stock and the stone, take a left at Midgard, which is what tells you that Thor isn't by his mother. She's Midgard or Earth or whatever. So he's obviously off traveling elsewhere. And she'll show you the way to the Trembling Bridge, which you'll find your mother and she'll show you the way to the Trembling Bridge or the Bifrost. Can I get home today? If you walk fast, and then you've done nothing but mock me. If I ever meet you again, I'll repay you for this. Thor storms away. Odin wins. So again, this is a very interesting story. We're getting ready to do a lot of the talks about Odin, and most of your when you look at any of the other people that talk about Odin, they ascribe a lot of characteristics to him that are only found in this particular poem. And because of that, you just get a really bad idea of it. So they don't realize that he's talking shit. Apparently they have never done that. Apparently they've never worked construction, never bumped chests with another man or punched dudes, your friend in the shoulder while they're walking by. And I understand that. When, you can't imagine Jackson Crawford, going out and doing these kind of things as he's sitting around worming in his books in the Berkeley College and Boulder College, two of the most liberal cities in the entire country. It's just not that environment. So this is part of why I'm really big on living the life that they lived or as close to it and having those understandings from that. When these people look at this story, they don't understand what it is to harass another friend and have that kind of exchange, to understand that this big bad friend could definitely come over and just tear your face off, just pummel you to death. And those type of friends typically are bullyish. When they walk around, anytime they're in a situation, they're and they always push and bull their way around. So occasionally it's fun when you're in a situation where that bullying and that pushiness is of absolutely no use to them. Then that's occasionally fun to give them a good ribbon and really get under their skin with it. Some of the other things that you see in that is you see a little bit of premonition coming on with some of the Ragnarok type things. Like maybe Odin a little bit is trying to light a fire under Thor's ass just a little bit with it at the end. You see some things that are coming that he's kind of provoking him with. Now, the thing that I've always thought was missing from this, and again, a lot of these things are missing pieces, missing pages, whatnot. This particular poem, I've always thought should have an ending where once Thor actually makes it back to Asgard, Odin's sitting there, having waited on Thor to come to the council and whatnot, and starts giving Thor shit again, only as Odin himself, as king of the gods. Well, we had this council, the mighty Thor, protector of Midgard, champion of the people. He's supposed to be at this council. He's supposed to be the voice of the people. And what are you doing, Thor? Lounging around? What kind of nonsense are you at? Were you fighting giants? And then Thor has to go and recount the story of how he was defeated by this ferryman. And you can just really imagine then at that point, Odin's, the mighty Thor was defeated by a ferryman? I'm supposed to believe this? And now this would completely complete the joke. The entire time, only Odin in and of himself knowing this. But as we're going to find out later as we move on through these series of poems and stories that I derive my thinkings from and my understandings of Odin from, we're going to see that I fully believe that Odin himself had no need for everybody else to laugh at the joke. Inside, he fully enjoyed the joke. That's all he needed. He's, this is the wanderer. He regularly just went out and pretended to be who he wasn't and didn't want people to recognize him, didn't want the attention, wanted to just sit back and see what was happening, poke and prod and see what happens, see what people do. So for him to do this, and then just, like I said, if Thor came back and then Odin just from the flip side gave him the shit again, oh, I can just imagine how that would tickle me pink. And that's one of the beautiful things about these stories, is that with stories like that and with those understandings, these are realistic beings that you can grasp and you can relate to, and you can understand the things that they are doing and thinking. And through that, you get a real understanding of this cosmology. So we're going to work on those. We're going to go ahead and start doing some of the other stories and some of the other poems of Odin, and get an understanding of who he is, and then work on the other gods. And I'm going to find a good copy of the creation story, and Jared's the one putting the pictures and doing any of the nice things and the editing and making it nice. That definitely is not me. I don't know. It's a magic box. And once again, we got George Weissman with the Brown's gas coming up. So we're going to get a real nice hydrogen talk. So it's just going to be me, but we're going to discuss hydrogen. And then on the bedtime stories coming up soon, Lucas and I are going to discuss Mercury in and of itself. And we're going to kind of take and break down the individual components and look at the mechanics and what those components do. So that way we can put the whole thing into an entire system and then see how that whole thing is working and interlocking and what things are causing what. So, and which can create an entire chain of events. It's beautiful. And then ideally at the end of this, we recreate in the laboratory what we're talking about and make an actual functional model, like science. Ooh, science. But so we're going to have that coming up here, and then Dave Weiss, recording with Dave Weiss coming up. So check that out, and thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys here soon. Thanks.